On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
That is actually the next thing that I do want to discuss. So I would assume I talked to Derek and he said, you already know this, so hopefully I'm not breaking any news to you, but it sounds like you'll be going to AAA next year. So you're moving up the ranks. So first and foremost, congrats to you. That's awesome. AAA is a really fun level to be at, especially with guys moving up and down and interacting with major league staff and things like that. So my first question for you is just what adjustments are you anticipating that you'll have to make with this move?
Yeah. I think first off, kind of going what we just talked about, one thing I learned a lot in AA this year dealing with some of our older guys is you have to listen. When you're an A-ball, it's your responsibility to teach, it's your responsibility to make sure they come in, when they come in, because they don't know any better. When you start working with older guys that have had careers for 5-10 years, they've been with other organizations, they've played in the big leagues, it's not my job to come in and tell you, you got to do everything my way. That's not the way to go about it. You need to listen because these guys have things that have made them successful. They've had things that have kept them on the field. So I think for me, I learned that a lot this year was just listening to those guys. And then it's not to say that we're not going to step in and say something if we need to, or if we need to push a guy or they do less or add or subtract. We'll always have that conversation when it needs to come. I think just listen. There's a lot of power that I think it also shows them that you care about them and what they need to get ready to go. I think another thing, adjustment wise, this is kind of normal now, but just understanding when you're a new affiliate, you go to new cities, there's different travel, there's different gyms. It's always kind of fun, kind of not fun, trying to figure all that stuff out your first go around. But like I said, that's something that each year I think I've gotten better at, and just understanding what needs to get done. And, hey, do we need to go to the field for a gym bus? Is there a gym within a walking distance from the hotel that's nice and we can get everything done? And, I'll lean on Derek and Nate Friedman, our two coordinators on that stuff. They both have been in Reno, so they'll be good guys to pick their brains on that. And that'll always be helpful. And I think another thing, adjustment-wise for me, is you get used to all the transactions in the minor leagues. It just starts becoming normal. But I know between the big leagues and AAA, especially as a kid seeing it firsthand a lot, I mean, it's a different beast. So for me, I think just knowing how much, guys go up for a spot start or somebody gets hurt and somebody's going up the next day. So I just want to make that as smooth as a transition as possible and be on the same page with the big league staff. And, just if anything, keep the weight room consistent for guys.
Yeah, you mentioned like interactions with the major league staff, players going up and down. So how do you make that smooth? Are there set reports that you guys have? Are there lines of communication? Like what is your way of envisioning this being successful?
Yeah, I think from a mindset perspective, nothing really changes from the last few years. That's one thing our department does a pretty good job of is communication, and we take a lot of pride in that. So it doesn't matter if I was in Visalia, Hillsborough, Amarillo, Reno. If a guy goes up, a guy goes down, we communicate basic things such as what was his last body weight? When did he lift last? If the strength coach hasn't had a player before, I'll sometimes shoot a little tidbit about, hey, this is his routine. This is how he works. This is how he goes about his stuff. If it's a starting pitcher, sometimes I'll just let them know, hey, this is what his 5-day routines look like. This is when he throws aside. So just give them that basic info. I don't think anything changes from that mentality. Obviously, Nate Shaw and Scott Klein are two big league guys I'll have a conversation with at some point and just get on the same page of what specifically do you want and then execute that. Another thing for me too is I finished my LMT license last off season. So that was a new thing for me this year, was kind of helping out in the training room with some soft tissue stuff here and there. If guys come in the weight room, helping out and learning to communicate that with our trainer and all of us be on the same page. So that's another thing just I'll need to communicate with them is, sometimes some of these older guys, they need a little bit more and they'll come see me for just maintenance stuff. It's nothing serious, but they just know, hey, I got to do this twice a week to stay on the field. So keeping Nate and Scott in the loop on that, just so if a guy shows up in the weight room and says, hey, can you do this on me? it doesn't cause a red flag or any alarm of, oh, can you not go tonight? No, it's just maintenance stuff. He's been doing this stuff. And obviously communicate with our trainers and they'll communicate with the big league guys on that as well. So those are a few things. And then just to add one extra layer to this kind of topic is I've heard Derek say this a lot the last few years, and then now being in Reno, it'll apply to me. But just when you're in AAA, you're an extension of those big league guys. In a way, you're their assistant. And we just talked about all the transactions and guys going up and down, and kind of hit on this a little bit earlier too, but just everything that goes into going from AAA to big leagues to AAA, all the stress that guys deal with, from the crazy travel to I've got to get my families from A to B. I started seeing that in AA this year, as well as everything's win at all costs every single night at the big leagues. So the last thing that you want to do is the weight rooms be different setups in Reno and then Chase Field. So for me, I just want to work with Nate and Scott and be on the same page with them. So, when guys go up, when they go down, it's just very easy transition from a weight room perspective.
Yeah, when I was in AAA, it was the most difficult ones were when the team was on the West Coast and their game time was different than on the East Coast. And we would stay up at night and watch the game and be like, all right, that guy got hurt. One of our guys is going to get a call. And then sure enough, it's like, 2 a.m. East Coast time, and we're waking guys up like, hey, you need to go. And I would text our strength guys right away, this is our guy, this is what he's done, this is his routine, blah, blah, blah. And it got to the point where they're like, we are learning transactions from you. Like we're getting information from you before we're getting it from anybody else. I'm like, good. I want it to be over communicated. I don't want a time where a guy shows up and you don't have information on him. And, that's really important. And like you said, winning it at all costs is a huge thing in the big league. So I can remember there were times in AAA where we had a starter lined up. The big league game started before us, and we had to scratch our starter because we didn't know if the big leagues was going to need guys to pitch or not. And those are the kind of things that you may not see as much in the lower levels that are much more frequent in AAA. And so having that communication, understanding that, things happen, and they can happen very fast, is going to help you. And then the other thing too, for me, that really helped was just understanding that sometimes less is a little bit more. I know there's probably times where guys want to push it, or go a little heavier on things. But again, you don't want them to play sore. And then 2, you don't want to send a guy up to the big leagues and he just blew it out in the weight room with you, and he's going in and he's moving terribly and he's feeling sore and he's feeling tight or whatever. Like all of those other stresses that come, like you said, the family and the media and all of this also weigh on them. So you don't really want the weight room to be weighing on them, no pun intended, but there's just a lot more stress that comes with the big leagues and with those transactions and with things happening, that it's, you really have to be that much more dialed in, but also you're that much more invested, right? Sometimes AA feels like years away from the big leagues. And then you get to AAA and it's like, I had a guy, he came into the weight room, took his pre-workout, he's ready to rock. We got the weight on the bar. Manager calls him into the office and they're like, we need you in Boston now. And we were an hour outside. We were in Pawtucket. He came back in the weight room. He's like, dude, I can't lift today. I got to go. I got to drive to Boston. So he's driving to Boston. He just finished his pre-workout. He's probably, losing his mind on the drive up there. But, those are the things that like in AA, that's probably not going to happen. And in AAA, I'm sure you've experienced this with your dad too, is like when guys get the call for the first time, like it's really awesome. And you're going to see it quite a bit. So it's a good time. It's a bit of a stressful time. Like you said, you're ultimately an extension of the big leagues. And a lot of times that feels really cool. Sometimes it feels not so great because although you're an extension of the big leagues, your resources are certainly not the same as the big leagues. But it sounds like you have a good plan in place in terms of transactions. And then the other side of this is creating buy-in with your players, with your staff there, with the programming as a whole. What kind of strategies are you looking to use? Because we mentioned there are going to be guys from other organizations. There are going to be older guys looking to hang around. There's going to be your 4A up and down guys. You're going to be your elite prospects that are on the brink. Like there's all these different personalities and different situations when you're in AAA? Like, how do you plan on strategizing all of that for yourself?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think the listening is a huge part, and maybe get more weight room specific with kind of an example. But I had a few guys this year that it felt pretty strongly of, hey, I need to do a trap bar deadlift, or I need to do a belt squat, or I've got to have some rotational landmine presses in my program. Okay, does that make sense for the guy? Yeah, it does. Is that going to hurt them, or is it going to help them understanding that part of it? Okay, it's good for them. It's not going to hurt them. It's helpful. Okay, I'm going to listen to you. You like that? We see it as a fit in your programming. I'm going to give you those 2 or 3 things. And then on top of it, that might lead to the relationship. It might lead to more conversations where now, you have your 2 or 3 things, and that gives me a window where there's 2 or 3 other small things I think that are important, and we can blend that in there for the guy. So I think, especially with these older guys that have been with different organizations, and by the time they get to me, I'm their 10th strength coach, it's working with them as a team. And that's not to say you're always trying to be their best friend, or, there's times you have to put your foot down and this is what we're doing, or you've got to be better at this. But at the end of the day, it's a lot more of a team ability and being teammates with them. And hey, this is what you feel like you need. This is what I feel like you need. Let's meet in the middle. Let's work together on this so we can get you ready to play tonight. I think that's one thing that I learned that a little bit at this year, and I know next year I'll be challenged even more with that. Another thing, just with buy-in, is just like understanding what makes guys tick. The easy guys are the guys that love the gym and want to spend the whole day in there. And when they're not lifting, they're watching TV, hanging out, sitting on a foam roller. Those are the easy ones. And then there's some guys that, as you know, hey, I'm just here to play baseball. I don't want any part of the gym. It's not what I'm getting paid to do. So with those guys, you got to understand what makes them tick. Maybe a guy's been banged up. Maybe he hasn't been banged up, but he just sees the importance of, hey, I've got to come in 10, 15 minutes and do my stuff so I can stay healthy and stay on the field. If I'm not healthy, I'm not getting called up. So sometimes understanding maybe that's the avenue to help guys get some buy-in and see some importance in the gym. And then another thing that I think is critical and can be really important is building a good relationship with the pitching, hitting coach, the rest of the staff, because there have been times where I'll have 10, 15 free minutes and I'll go up to the cage and just watch the end of cage work, or maybe get out to the field a little bit early and watch the end of a starting side. You'll just be sitting there watching, and maybe they're working on something, and maybe the hitting coach is like, hey, Ryan, we're working on a loading pattern with this guy, or maybe it's front side landing or something, to whatever it may be. Hey, is there anything in the gym that we could do to help this guy out? And then now it's you, the coach, and the player all having a conversation. It's like, yeah, we could actually do this drill. We could blend it with some aquabag stuff to help give this guy a feel when he comes to the cage. And then now you get the guy in the gym, you get the hitting coach in the gym, you all put your heads together. And now the guy buys in simply for the fact of, he doesn't really see it as the gym and baseball as 2 separate things. He sees, I'm going to the gym and this is going to help me hit tonight, or this is going to help my mechanics, or whatever it may be. And now they're coming to the gym to help them with baseball. So I think that's something that's always, there's a lot of different things going on there. It's very complex at times, but just trying to get on the same page as those hitting and pitching coaches can be big, because you can work together to relay messages to players, as well as work with the players, on what's really important is what they're doing on the field every night.
Yeah, the staff thing. The other thing with that is understanding the schedule is really important for the strength coach the higher you go, because one, guys don't read the schedule. I'm sure you've seen that yourself, right? And so they're going to say, hey, what time is the meeting? Hey, what time is hitting? What time is stretch today? So having the schedule down will help you. And then the other thing is coaches themselves are also historically late to things. So being able to understand that if the hitter's meeting is at 3:40 and stretch is at 4 and BP is at 4:20, ultimately you have to be done by 4:20. But if that hitter's meeting goes until 4:05 or 4:10, like, you're the one that can kind of get everybody back in line and have that stretch done by 4:20. That's just an example. But so yeah, having that connection with your staff also helps you in terms of like keeping the schedule in line and keeping everything in order. I do have 2 questions for you. So one, will you be in big league spring training / have you already been in big league spring training before? And then 2, do you guys do the food at your affiliates, or do you have nutritionists that do that for you?
Yeah. So with the Diamondbacks, usually your first year, you only do minor league camp. And then after your first year moving forward, you have big league rotations. So
Okay.
in year 2, think I had about a week over there. And then in year 3 last year, I think I had 5-6 days. We had a few more guys that were doing rotations, so it was a little bit shorter. So yes, I've been there before, done that. I'm not sure how to look this year. I know that's something that our big league guys and our coordinators decide, but I assume I'd spend a little bit more time over there. Just, you're going to have a lot of guys that are big league invites to camp where they know they're going to be in AAA. So they're probably going to want me over there just to start building those relationships and getting on the same page as everybody. So to that question, and then, yeah, we are in charge of all the food. So that's another thing that takes a lot of time, but it's also really good. I think just being in charge of that, helping out with that. We have our nutritionist, Joe, who's awesome, leaning on him. But yeah, we're in charge of, we kind of changed our food format this year where we do like a lunch when guys get to the field. We do a post BP snack. So that might be something light as in a sandwich or in smoothies. And then we do your normal post game spread.
That's another layer, going back to the point you talk about, like being in new cities and being unfamiliar with certain things. The restaurants in the area you're also unfamiliar with, and the higher you go, I think it's a little easier, right? Like you're in bigger cities that probably have more options versus like my first year in pro ball, I was in Bristol, Tennessee, and we had, like Popeyes and like Bojangles. That was it. And like a Little Caesars, you know what I mean? Where at least when you go to the AAA cities, like Reno is a bigger city, like you're going to have a lot of options. Same with all the other places you go, but you still have to kind of figure out and navigate the landscape of all the food. And then, every once in a while when you're in a city, you kind of want to get that city's like, signature dish or whatever. And so you have to figure that out and kind of go through all those layers too, in addition to finding gyms and taking care of guys and doing your reports and staying up late for transactions. So there's a lot going on in AAA. And, when I was in, we would always talk about like that AAA staff really is a very, very important part of, the big picture in the organization. And you really want somebody there that you can rely on, that can do the job well, that you can trust. Because like we said multiple times, like you're an extension of the big leagues. And, a lot of the times in the big leagues, like never are you going to finish a season having only played with 26 guys. The reality is you're going to go over the 40 that's on the 40 man. You can easily see 50, 60, 70 guys on a roster. And so that AAA area is so important for taking care of all of those guys in that depth, because baseball, you are going to use your depth and you want to make sure that they're healthy, they're performing well, they're feeling good. And a big part of that is just, it falls on the AAA staff to do that. There are parts even, when I was in, it was like, we need to teach the AAA guys professionalism. We need to teach them how to dress on the bus. We need to teach them how to be, when they're on the road. And like, that's not necessarily the job of a strength coach, but we're kind of all pulling the same rope. And so, it does fall on our shoulders sometimes, and right or wrong, it's not something that we're asked to do in our contract and our, our job requirements, but it is something for the betterment of the organization of like, listen, don't touch the radio. Like, don't change the music when you go to the big leagues. Like, let the veteran guys play the music. And they're like, no, that's not a thing. I'm like, all right, as soon as you go in there and change that radio, when the veterans are in there, they're going to yell at you. And, most of them listen. The ones that don't find out the hard way. Sometimes you just can't help it. But yeah, there's a lot more that goes into being in a AAA than just a strength and conditioning coach. But if you can do it well in AAA, I strongly believe that you can do it well in the big leagues as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's something that is really important, is seeing the big picture. I think it's really easy to like, I'm just the weight room, that's my job. Strength and conditioning is my job. But in all reality, every staff member is just as important as the other one, and getting whatever message it may be to the player. So when they get to AAA, when they get to the big leagues, they're ready for that moment and they're prepared. And sometimes that's simple stuff as, weight room, gauge, what's actually our jobs are. And sometimes that's a little stuff of the professionalism. And, I remember an A-ball, had to get on a guy, probably happened 2 or 3 times. Pitcher gets done pitching, comes in, does their stuff in the weight room. Then they go annihilate the post-game spread in the 7th inning. And it's like, you're the only guy in there. The trainer's on the field, all the coaches are out there. So those are some conversations that some guys take well, some don't. But it's little stuff like that if you don't do it, you're failing the guy. And I don't know, that to me is kind of what we talked about earlier. That's the most important part, is doing whatever you can do to help these guys out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, man. I'm really excited for you. Congrats again on the promotion. I think you'll have a great time there. And I kind of want to transition here. So we've kind of talked about a lot of things, but is there anything else that you believe makes a strength and conditioning coach successful? And then I say maybe, since you've seen different levels, like maybe at the lower levels versus the high levels, the young coaches in baseball versus the veteran coaches, like anything that you think stands out to help you be successful?
Yeah. You're going to hear a lot of people say this, but I also think that's why it's very important. That's why a lot of people say it's the relationship part. You have to be able to build relationships with people, and it's not so much be everybody's friend, but just be able to build relationships and build mutual respect for each other. If you can do that, a lot of good things happen. If you don't do that, then that's where you lose buy-in, you lose guys wanting to come to the gym. So I think for me, I just try to take a lot of pride in that. Like, you can be the best strength coach in the world and be the smartest guy and have all these tools in your toolbox, but if you can't communicate with guys, relate to guys, see the big picture, then you're just going to be hitting your head on a wall. And then I think another thing too, for me to go along with that, I think really good strength coaches, especially in professional baseball, adaptability is a very important thing that you have to have. We've hit on this talk in the last 30 minutes, but schedules change all the time. You're going to get rainouts, you're going to get rain delays, travel days are going to get messed up, guys are going to come in banged up. You always have plan A, you have plan B. Sometimes you have to go to plan C, plan D. And that's what it takes to get the guy ready for 7 o'clock that night. I think of like this year, we dealt with a lot more rain out problems, double headers. I think one time we had a gym bus scheduled for the next morning, like 10 o'clock, 10:30. And the game went in a 2-hour rain delay. We started it back up at 10 o'clock and finished the game at midnight. I just made the executive decision. I don't know if it was right or wrong, but I just said, we're not lifting tomorrow. I want guys, we just had a rough week. We played like 12 straight before the 4th of July, so you didn't get your normal off day. And we went, I think we were in 4 cities in 10 days or something, which is a lot for AA. Guys aren't used to that. So I just made the executive decision. Hey, no gym bus tomorrow. If you want to come Saturday, you can. That's fine. So I think just being able to adapt, and then kind of what I always ask myself is, what do these guys need to be ready for 7 o'clock tonight? Sometimes you have to change the plan. Sometimes you don't. But what's important is when the first pitch happens, these guys are ready to play.
Yeah, the 7 o'clock piece is so important, especially the more you go up. And like we said, the winning at all costs is kind of the most important thing. And it's not always the right thing, I guess, right? Like there's long-term education and then there's short-term fixes, right? And sometimes the short-term fix is what's needed. And, a guy comes in and they're like, dude, I was up all night. I was drinking, I was partying. Like, I need you to help me get ready for the game tonight. The short-term thing is you need to help him get ready. The long-term thing is like, listen, we both know this isn't the right decision for you. Let's try to work on this in the future, whatever, get our sleep, whatever. But you can't change the fact of what he did last night. You just need to help him get ready. And again, sometimes short-term fixes are the opposite of long-term, like positive health decisions, but that's what the game is, right? And I'm not advocating for that. It's just the reality of what the situation is. And especially the higher you go, and if you're in a market that really values winning, there's media scrutiny, all of that. You're trying to make a playoff push, like whatever you can do to get them ready is the right decision. And as long as, in my personal opinion, if you get them ready to play that night and it's not going to like negatively, I'll give you an example. A guy comes in, he's got a little hamstring thing going on. You got to get him ready to play, right? You got to do what you can to get that hamstring feeling good. And as long as you're not doing something that's going to put that hamstring at risk of getting hurt long-term, it's probably a win, right? If you're in there and you're like, nah, you're fine. Let's get through this. We got to get a lift in with whatever. And then next thing you know, the guy blows his hamstring, he missed 6 to 8 weeks. That was probably the wrong decision. But if you're doing what you can to put people in a position to succeed, or at the very least to play at 7 o'clock, right? Like, the baseball gods kind of let it fly how it flies. But ultimately, as you move up, that is a really big part of your job, is just getting them ready to play that night, where some of the lower levels in the minor leagues, it's probably a little bit more about development, education, preparing them for the big leagues in the long term. Once you get moved up, it's win tonight. And, that's kind of how it is. It's just the reality of things.
Yeah. I know the second part of your question was kind of the difference in the levels. And I think one thing for me, when I was in low A, you get a lot of young, especially the way we do things in Arizona, we did a lot of young Latin American kids, and it's their first time being an affiliate. So I think what makes a good strength coach there is it's just simple stuff of show up on time, work hard, be a good teammate, hold yourself accountable. You're more teaching than tangible type stuff of, just how to have structure, how to show up, how to work hard, how to do things the right way. And when I got to high A, it was kind of cool because I had a lot of those guys in low A the year before, and then we drafted, and I think we sent 22. We probably had 6, 7 guys that got drafted and they sent to Visalia. Then they started the year with me in Hillsboro. So in high A, it was a little bit different because you got these college guys who've been in college programs. They know how to show up on time. They know how to work hard. It's a lot more teaching now. Hey, you're about to play every day for 6 straight months, 7 straight months. You're not playing 3 games a week. So there's some different routes that we have to take to keep you on the field. And they ask more questions as well as at times I ask them more questions. Instead of just me telling you what to do, what do you think today? What have we been doing? This is July. What do you think you need? So I think that that's a big part in that gap between low A and high A is the educational, as well as them taking ownership for what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And then when double A, it's just a mixed bag. You got some guys that I've had the last 2 years, and it's a piece of cake. We worked each other. They know the expectation. I know them. It's a smooth running machine. You have some guys that have kind of shot up the system, and kind of like the prospect you talked about earlier, you understand that this guy shot up and you might need to treat him a little bit more like you would a guy in low A or high A strictly because of where he's at, but at the same time, still creating accountability and ownership because he's a good stretch away from now being in AAA and a step away from the big leagues. And then mixing that with, you have some older guys that have played in the big leagues, or you have some guys that have been maybe in AA for 3 years, or they've spent a lot of time between AAA and AA. And then those are the guys, maybe it's like, okay, I need to listen to you a little bit more. We need to work as a team so we can pull the rope in the same direction.
Yeah, kind of along the same lines. Do you have any advice for others? I mean, we're talking about finding success, and all of these things probably are interchangeable with advice on how to find success. But is there anything that we haven't hit on that you would say is more advice for others in the field?
Yeah, I think one thing that a lot of people get caught up in are positions and where they want to go in promotions. I think when you do that to yourself, you miss out what's right in front of you. And like we just talked about, every single level teaches you something. There's stuff that happened when I was in Visalia that I learned, and I took that to high A. And there's stuff that happened in high A that I took to double A. And I just think having that, ability to be present in the moment and just enjoy the moment, enjoy where you're at, instead of getting so caught up in where you're going to be, it's going to help you be your best for the guys. I heard this as a kid. So in 2015, I was going into my senior high school, and my dad had a player on his team. His brother played a long time in the big leagues. And the question was asked one day, they were just having a conversation in the training room, but he asked his older brother, who played, I think had a 10+ career in the big leagues. He asked him like, hey, what's the quickest way to get to the big leagues? And his brother told him, treat every level like it is the big leagues. And that's something I've kind of taken with me. I know I'm not a player, but just as a strength coach of like, if I'm in Arizona, if I'm in Visalia, Hillsboro, Amarillo, Reno, make that level my big league. So I'm giving it my best attention. I'm giving the players my best effort. And, there's things that change, right? Like how you treat or how you take a situation with an 18-year-old compared to the guy that's got 5 years in the big leagues. You might go about that a different way, but just having in the back of your mind, if I was in the big leagues, how would I do this? I think it helps keep you present, as well as when you get the promotion or you go to the next level, like not a lot changes. Keep being the same thing, keep showing up the same way every single day, which I think is important because the guys that we work with, it's a roller coaster. They're away from their families. The game's tough. You can have 5 graded bats and it shows you're 0 for 5. And it's just an up and down roller coaster. So I think when you take that mindset of I'm going to do my best every day and treat every day like it's the big leagues, then you're the same guy every day, and that's what they need.
Yeah, I can definitely say that I'm probably guilty of that a bit, right? It's like we all want to get to the big leagues, or a majority of us want to get to the big leagues, right? And especially once you start getting into Double A and then especially Triple A, you're like, man, I'm so close. I could make it to the big leagues. But the reality is, players move up and down, but where you're at in an affiliate level, barring any crazy unforeseen circumstances, like you're probably going to be there that whole year, right? And I know for myself, like I was in AAA. I really wanted to be in the big leagues. I really thought strongly that I should have already been in the big leagues. But at the same time, I was like, listen, I'm here. I'm in AAA. I'm not going up to the big leagues this year. I'll worry about that next year when my contract comes up again. I'm just going to make this as much like the big leagues as I can. And to your point, that was just how it was. Yeah, my head was in the clouds a little bit. I really wanted to be in the big leagues. I really envisioned myself in the big leagues, but at the same time, I used that to motivate me to make sure that I was doing my best each day. And I think that's kind of the line there where, like, it's good to have dreams, it's good to have aspirations, it's good to have goals. But if your head is stuck in the clouds and you're worrying about, oh, I can't wait to be in the big leagues, can't wait to be in the big leagues, and you're not doing the job there, you're never going to get the opportunity to do that job. But if you just do the job extremely well and people take note of how well you do the job, you'll eventually get promoted. And the reality is there's only 30 major league teams. Each team has 2, maybe 3 strength coaches. So you're looking at a total of 60 to 90 big league strength coaches in the world, right? And there's thousands and thousands of people that want those jobs. And so sometimes the timing lines up, sometimes it doesn't. But the reality is, next year you're going to be in AAA. You're probably not going to get promoted mid-season. The best way to put yourself in a good position and be in the big leagues in the future is to do a damn good job in AAA next year and to be where your feet are. You don't want to lose sight of the big leagues, of course, but you want to use that as motivation to get you to that next level and to do your best each day. And so for me, that's really awesome advice. And it's really cool that you got to hear that from just not even working in the clubhouse yet. And like I said, being around your dad, I think probably helps you to have a better understanding of things than most. But again, that's a bonus to you. That's not a knock on you by any means. Like, use that to your advantage and, help yourself with being in AAA this year, knowing the things that you know from your family. So like I said, I'm really excited for you, man. It sounds like things are going to go really well. You kind of got a good base, and it helps that you've come up the system with some of those players too. So the last one I have before we do the lightning round is just, do you have any continuing education resources for others? Books, podcasts, seminars, just where are you going to stay on top of things?
Yeah, I think a good book to read. It's pretty simple, but Zach DeComp, Movement Over Maxes is a good one just for somebody that's wanting to learn more about strength and conditioning and how to value movement, how to structure lifts. I just think that's a good basic baseline book for people and strength coaches to read. Another one, Ryan Holiday, Ego's the Enemy. That's more of less about strength and conditioning, but just more of personal development and, how you can be the best version of yourself. So those are kind of 2 books that I've liked a lot reading the last few years. As far as seminars to attend, one in person that I've been to, it was pretty good, was the Florida Baseball Armory. I went there a few years ago. I think it's a cool spot, especially if you're in professional baseball or want to be in professional baseball, to just kind of understand, blending that gap between the weight room and the skill side of the sport, and being able to communicate with the hitting, pitching coaches and kind of learn more on the skill act side. And then another one, this is online, that I liked a lot, was 8 Weeks Out by Joel Jameson. I took that online, and I remember going back to college, some of the energy system stuff gets very deep. It can get very confusing. I think he does a really good job of breaking it down in simple terms, and it helped me a lot because then I could relay that to players, and at the end of the day, they're the ones that need to know. So those are 2 seminars or courses that I think are really good. And then podcasts to listen to. I actually remember listening to this when I was in college some. I think this is a really good one if you want to be in professional baseball, just to actually hear from strength coaches and understand what goes on within the game. And then I'm going to be biased towards this, but the Elite Baseball podcast that Eric Cressy does is a great one. It's probably my go-to, just because they cover so many different topics. It's strength and conditioning, it's anatomy. They go through, certain injuries and the rehab protocols, as well as the hitting and pitching side. I just think, and I think they even cover some nutrition stuff at times too. It's just very well rounded. So if I'm driving cross country or on a plane ride, that's always my go-to, just to find something that sounds interesting and listen to that.
All right, we've been at it for basically an hour now, if not more, so I don't want to keep you any longer than I have to. But lightning round, you in? 4 questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, answers can be as long or as short as you want. First one, who is your biggest influence in the field of strength and conditioning?
I'm gonna have to go a few here.
That's fine.
High school, Coach Robertson just teaching me to love the gym, be in the gym. When I go home, I still go work out with him a few times, so love him. When I was in college, kind of 2 people, Rob Reicher Jr., who I talked about earlier, and then another that's been a really influence on me and kind of a mentor is Brandon McDaniel. I've known Brandon since I was a kid. And I remember in college, Brandon took multiple phone calls from me, helped kind of lead me down a path, put things in my head of, hey, if you want to be in baseball, you got to start thinking this way. So he's been a guy that, through college was very helpful for me. I still talk to him to this day. And then I think just professionally, the people here at the Arizona Diamondbacks have been huge. I've been here 3 years now. But Nate Shaw, Scott Klein, they always take time, our 2 big league guys, to talk with me, take me through things, always pour time into me. And then probably most importantly is Nate Friedman and then Derek Somerville, our 2 coordinators. I mean, those guys have been awesome. They answer my questions. They take my phone calls during the year. They push me to be a better strength coach, a better person. So just kind of some different phases of life, but those people have all played a huge part in who I am today.
Only had one piece of equipment to train with, what would it be?
Going cable column. I like cable column. Give me a few attachments too. Can hit upper body. You use a 3D strap, hit lower body, load it up well. You can hit rotational work, core work. There's a lot you can do.
What is your biggest accomplishment professionally and or personally?
I am just going to go in general. When I got done playing college baseball, I remember thinking this might be it. I played sports since I was a kid and been part of a team, and this could be the last of it. And being with the Diamondbacks now for 3 years, it's very team-orientated environment. And I'm just super thankful to get to come to work every single day. Most people hate spring training. Spring training is one of my favorite times of the year just because our strength staff, our trainers, I got really good relationships with all of them and all the laughter that goes on. So I'm proud to be a part of that.
Any career other than strength and conditioning, what would you choose?
I'd probably be a high school football coach. I really love the X's and O's of football. I'd love probably be like offensive coordinator. I don't know. There's something about that ever since I played in high school. Even as I watch football all day, I like that part of the game.
Ryan, if the listeners want to get in touch with you, where can we get more? Social media the best place, or is there a better place to go?
Yeah, I have an Instagram, RJ Harrel 10. I think that's what it is. But that's what I'm most active on social media.
Perfect. Ryan, it's been good to get to know you. It's been good to chat. I'm glad that Derek connected us. Best of luck in AAA this year, and we will talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me on. I enjoyed it.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part 2 of this 2-part interview with Ryan. I hope you enjoyed both parts 1 and 2. Obviously, in part 1, we got into his family ties in pro ball, his journey through the ranks, and then talking more training and microdosing and kind of a day-to-day approach to in-season, where obviously in part 2 here, we talked about his big move up to AAA this year, what to expect, some of the things that'll be similar, some of the things that'll be different. We talked a lot about relationship building, and then we finished with that continuing ed and finding success. So hopefully you were able to take a lot of notes and a lot of good nuggets from both interviews. 3 things that I took from Ryan in this part: knowing what makes an athlete tick can help with creating buy-in. A lot of good things come from building positive relationships and mutual trust with people, and every stop in your journey can teach you valuable lessons for future positions. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this interview, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.